Your early evening news now on BBC One with Sophie Rayworth.
Tonight, Russia launches one of its biggest missile attacks on Ukraine since the start of the war. Dozens have been fired at cities across the country, knocking out more power supplies.
This crater was likely the point of impact, and the power of the blast destroyed these cars and all the houses here.
Also on the programme, the government is reviewing whether to bring in COVID restrictions for people travelling from China as restrictions there are eased. Police raids as Albanian drug gangs are accused of exploiting the Channel migrant crisis. And the town in Canada that's been turned into ice by the biggest storm for decades. Good evening. Russia has launched a fresh wave of missile strikes on Ukraine, one of the biggest bombardments since the start of the war. The Ukrainian authorities say about 70 missiles were launched from air and sea, though many of them were intercepted. Dozens of missiles did hit towns and cities across Ukraine, causing significant damage to the national grid across the country, leaving towns and cities without power. But the head of Ukrainian military intelligence has told the BBC that Russia is running out of missiles. Hugo Beshega reports from Kyiv.
On the outskirts of Kyiv, tears and anger. Tatiana lives far from the front lines, but this morning, war has come to her. Her house was hit when Russia launched another barrage of airstrikes. She shows us the renovation work they had just done.
My granddaughter was in this bedroom and you can see what happened. It's a very difficult feeling when you're just waiting for the next attack to happen.
Tatiana's husband was in the next room when the ceiling fell around him.
I went deaf for a while. Everything started to crumble around me. I ran outside and found my daughter screaming.
We still don't know what happened. This crater was likely the point of impact, and the power of the blast destroyed these cars and all the houses here, with personal belongings everywhere. 3 people were injured, no one was killed. Russia's missiles and drones have brought scenes like this to places across this country.
But Kyiv's mayor says the attacks won't break people's determination to resist.
The Russians want to bring depression, especially right now, Christmas time, New Year. The Russians want to bring us to black time. Ukrainian people very angry, and they told better we stay without electricity, without heating, but we never give up.
And from Ukraine's spy chief, a warning: these attacks are unlikely to stop.
They will try to continue them. Can they do this for long? No, because they do not have many missiles left. Their defense industry is incapable of producing enough missiles to sustain the same scale of strikes. This is another reason they're trying to get missiles from other countries.
The strikes again have disrupted the lives of millions of Ukrainians. They've emerged from underground shelters, but wonder when and where the next attack will hit. And across the country, Ukrainians are tired and angry with these attacks. Many say civilians have become Russia's targets in this war. Now here in Kyiv, the authorities say Moscow has been using winter as a weapon by leaving millions of people in the dark and in the cold. They say this is how Russia is responding to military setbacks on the battlefield by attacking civilian sites in places away from the front lines. The country's foreign minister described today's attacks as barbarism, saying peaceful cities have been attacked ahead of New Year. And again, he said these attacks could amount to war crimes.
Hugo, with the latest there from Kyiv. Thank you. The government says it is keeping the situation around people arriving from China very much under review. Travel restrictions are finally being eased in China despite a surge in coronavirus. EU health officials have been meeting today to discuss their response to an expected influx of visitors from China in the next few weeks. Our medical editor Fergus Walsh is here. Fergus.
Thanks, Sophie. The sudden lifting of China's zero COVID policy after nearly 3 years has allowed the virus to let rip across an under-immunised population with little natural immunity. That's worried neighbouring countries, including Japan, South Korea and India, who've imposed COVID checks on arrivals from China. The US has followed suit, saying a lack of adequate and transparent data from China was partly behind its decision to require a negative COVID test. Italy is the only European country to impose checks, including a post-arrival PCR test, which will allow genomic surveillance of potential new COVID threats. The outbreak in China is being driven by several Omicron subvariants, including BF7, which has already been circulating in the UK. The latest COVID estimates for the UK earlier this month were that around 1 in 45 people had the virus. That probably means 1 million people a week are getting infected here. So there's plenty of COVID about. But most of the UK population is very well protected from severe illness via a combination of vaccines and repeated natural infection, meaning COVID, while still a potential danger here, is no longer the threat it once was. Sophie.
Fergus, thank you. A third person has been arrested over the murder of 26-year-old Ellie Edwards, who was shot at a pub in Wallasey on Christmas Eve. A 31-year-old man is being questioned on suspicion of conspiracy to murder. Our correspondent Nick Garnett has more.
The moment a man is arrested, a 31-year-old from Tranmere, now being questioned on suspicion of conspiracy to murder. A hail of shots were fired into the Lighthouse pub from the pavement outside late on Christmas Eve. One bullet hit Ellie Edwards, killing her. 4 others were injured. 1 is still in hospital. In a nearby church, the sirens told those worshipping that something was wrong.
We were in the midst of our first Holy Communion of Christmas service, which is usually a very peaceful service. And around about 10 to 12, a noticeable amount of police activity, the sirens, police cars being heard. And it just changed the feeling of what was happening. It went from a sense of peace to a sense of what's going on. We could feel in the church that something wasn't quite right outside of it. It was not normal.
Frozen in time, the Lighthouse Inn stays closed and a constant stream of flowers mount up.
Absolutely saddened and sick at the thought of anything like that could happen to a young woman when she's just going out trying to enjoy herself.
Detectives have been granted more time to question 2 other people arrested on Boxing Day, a 30-year-old man on suspicion of murder and a woman who's 19, suspected of conspiracy. Police say that they're going to stay here for the foreseeable future. The pub itself will probably stay closed until after New Year. Now, Merseyside police say they're still looking for a black car, probably a Mercedes, that was seen driving away from the scene after the murder at high speed. And they're also, crucially, looking for the murder weapon.
Nick, thank you. A third man has been arrested on suspicion of the murder of Cody Fisher, who was stabbed to death on Boxing Day at a nightclub event in Birmingham. West Midlands Police said a knife had been found and it had applied for the nightclub's licence to be reviewed. 4 other people have been arrested on suspicion of assisting an offender. The new head of the TUC, Paul Novak, has accused the government of refusing to negotiate on public sector pay. But the Defence Secretary, Ben Wallace, said today that the government is not going to be held to ransom amid a continuing wave of industrial action. Border Force staff at 6 major airports were on strike today, along with driving examiners in some parts of England. Rail workers will go on strike again next week for almost all of the first week of January. Ambulance staff will walk out again on 2 separate days next month, as will nurses. Here's our business correspondent, Katie Austin.
Picket lines have become a familiar sight this year as an increasing number of workers take part in strikes. The new leader of the TUC, the umbrella organisation for dozens of unions in England and Wales, said more transparency was needed around the process by which independent review bodies recommend pay for NHS staff and other public sector workers, such as teachers and police officers.
It's really important that if the pay review body is going to continue, that they have real credibility and they're seen to be genuinely independent. And as I say, the pay review body process itself, I think, is in danger of being brought into disrepute because the government is hiding behind the pay review bodies, refusing to negotiate on pay and refusing to reach a reasonable settlement with our public sector unions.
This morning, the Defence Secretary insisted pay review bodies were independent and ministers would neither ignore their advice to suit the agenda of trade union leaders nor be held to ransom. He reiterated it was for unions to negotiate with employers. Ben Wallace was speaking at Manchester Airport as he visited military personnel covering for striking Border Force workers. Yesterday, the PCS union's leader claimed people were being waved through to avoid queues, but Mr Wallace rejected any suggestion that the border was less secure.
Our borders are safe and secure. These individuals, the members of the armed forces that have come to help out when the strikes are on, are carrying out a very straightforward function and of course backed up by computer systems and scans that allow us to identify people of worry coming into the country.
Ministers and unions both say they want strike action to end, but as things stand, the new year will bring further walkouts. Katie Austin, BBC News.
A look now at some other stories making the news today. At least 19 people have been killed in a fire at a casino hotel in northwest Cambodia. Police say more than 400 people were in the building at the time. Many of the injured are in a critical condition. 30 people are still missing. Hundreds of protesters have gathered in Jerusalem, where the most hardline government in Israel's history has been sworn in. Benjamin Netanyahu has become the Prime Minister for a record 6th term. His government includes ultra-Orthodox Jewish and nationalist parties, some of whom have spoken out against the rights of Palestinians and LGBT+ people. A GP surgery in Yorkshire has accidentally sent its patients a text telling them they have an aggressive lung cancer. What they had meant to say was Merry Christmas. Ascot Medical Practice in Doncaster, which has 8,000 patients, sent the message 2 days before Christmas before texting again to say it had been sent in error. This year has seen the number of people crossing the Channel in small boats rise to more than 45,000, with a record number of them from Albania, almost 13,000. The National Crime Agency says that over the last 12 months, Albanian drugs gangs in the UK have exploited the migrant crisis. Our Home Affairs correspondent June Kelly reports.
A terraced house in Hartlepool. According to police intelligence, it's been taken over by the drugs trade. This is one of a series of raids by the Cleveland Force targeting suspected organised crime operations. A 25-year-old Albanian man is arrested. He's also wanted by police in Kent.
Any persons?
At a second address, officers find a living room full of cannabis plants. Here there's another arrest. Again, the man is 25 and Albanian. He's also a suspected illegal immigrant. Both men have now been charged with cannabis production. Over a few hours in these and other raids, police seized drugs valued at almost £500,000.
The serious and organised crime groups, to make sure that they apply their trade, there's also associated violence in and around the areas between different and rival gangs. So this is another reason why we're trying to protect the public and keep them safe, and especially the vulnerable people that these organised crime groups prey on.
National law enforcement chiefs say that Albanian gangs have become involved in what they describe as an explosion in cannabis production around the country. And the gangs are now drawing on the growing number of migrant arrivals. In some cases, the cannabis farms are being run with forced labour. Young Albanians, many who have come across the Channel, can be in hock to the gangs. The criminals are demanding payback for funding their passage to the UK. This is a system of debt bondage. On the phone from an immigration removal centre, one man in his 20s spoke to us. He was prosecuted and convicted after being found working on a cannabis farm.
I was in Belgium looking for work. Some Albanian men said that they would help me. I got into a lorry and I didn't know where I was going. I was trafficked into UK. The gang said I owed them £24,000 and they threatened to kill my family. I was told I had to work in a cannabis farm. I was beaten.
If you didn't choose to come to the United Kingdom, why do you want to stay in the United Kingdom now?
My life will be in danger if I go back to Albania.
A charity is now helping him to fight deportation. He says he's a victim of modern slavery. The government wants to make the system for assessing these cases tougher. Most are currently accepted. The people smugglers are making millions from illegal immigration. And law enforcement bosses say the influx of Albanians is in turn fueling crime in the UK. June Kelly, BBC News.
The latest Avatar film has made $1 billion in box office sales around the world in just 14 days.
Why do you come to us?
It is now the fastest movie to pass the $1 billion milestone this year. But its director, James Cameron, says Avatar: The Way of Water needs to make $2 billion just to break even. Now, tonight was the last opportunity this year to witness a rare phenomenon known as a planet parade. All the planets in our solar system were visible at the same time in the night sky. It happened just after sunset this evening, a short time ago. 5 of the planets were visible with the naked eye, and you could see the 2 that are furthest away, Uranus and Neptune, by using binoculars. 2, I think, have just gone beneath the horizon, but the rest, if you've got clear skies, should still be visible. Darren Bett can tell us more about that and the weather in a moment. And speaking of the weather, look at this. The Canadian town of Fort Erie that has been turned into an ice town, with these houses fully encased in ice after that powerful winter storm that struck North America, killing more than 65 people in the last few days. Temperatures have fallen so low that parts of the Niagara Falls have also frozen over, and you can see the thick layers of ice and snow around the waterfall on the northeast border between the US and Canada. The storm brought over 4 foot of snow in places, but slightly warmer weather is now on the way. Well, we can look at the weather here with Darren Bett, who can tell us all about the clear night skies, if there are any around, see planets, and the rest of the weather. Darren.
And Canada as well, because it is getting much milder. Temperatures across the eastern side of North America will be above average for the time of year. Massive swings in temperatures there. We do have some clearer skies around at the moment. It's been a day of sunshine and chillier winds and some blustery showers, but things are going to be changing. There is more water in the forecast, and a lot of it's going to come from this cloud here. That's going to be sweeping its way in from the Atlantic, bringing the cloudier skies and bringing rain to many western and eventually northern areas of the UK. Moving into colder air in Scotland as well. Overnight into tomorrow, we could see quite a bit of snow falling over the higher parts of northern Scotland, maybe 20 centimetres, and there could be an inch of rain falling in Northern Ireland, perhaps more rain than that across some southern parts of Scotland, where we have this amber rain warning from the Met Office. Given all the rain we've had, there's likely to be some further flooding in this part of the country. We've got rain across England and Wales early in the morning. That will sweep its way eastwards. As you can see, the wetter weather does move away into the North Sea, and through the afternoon we're going to find it brightening up with a few showers following. Still some wintry weather in northern parts of Scotland, where it's still quite cold, but for other parts of the UK it's probably going to be milder than today. It'll be windy again, but those temperatures probably getting up to 12 or 13 degrees. Into New Year's Eve, more rain to come across England and Wales, particularly across these southern areas. A little bit drier for Scotland and Northern Ireland. Still the threat of some rain, sleet and snow in the far north of Scotland, where those temperatures are struggling to around 4 or 5 degrees. Quite a contrast really across the UK, 14 or 15 degrees across East Anglia and the southeast of England. And if you are going to be out partying, well, there could be some further rain across England and Wales. Those weather fronts are taking most of the wet weather towards southeastern parts of England in time for New Year's Day, but we will see an area of low pressure bringing these showers into Northern Ireland, Northern England, up into Scotland, where we could again see a bit more snow. Those temperatures again 4 or 5 degrees, 12 degrees across southeastern parts of the UK. Very mild for this time of the year, but not the record temperatures that we had this time last year. Sophie.
Darren, thank you. And that's it from us on Thursday, the 29th of December. You can, of course, keep up to date with all the latest developments on the BBC website. But from the team here, it is for now goodbye. The news, however, continues here on BBC One because it's time to join our colleagues across the nations and regions for the news where you are. Goodbye.